Events such as what occurred yesterday in Santa Monica are becoming all too common, aren't they? And I get tired of having to process them and think of a way to respond. My response, I think, has turned into recently, thank God there's God, because I don't know how to deal with the same blessed thing happening week after month after year. One of my coworkers has a 7-year-old daughter who goes to Santa Monica Public School System, and I was talking to her yesterday, and she said she asked her daughter about the lockdown at school yesterday, and she said, you know, my daughter was scared, but she said, I pulled my shirt over my head so that the bad guy would only see flowers. I thought that was kind of beautiful. And it kind of made me think about Adventism, Seventh-day Adventism, because that's, in our name is wishing and hoping for something better, right? We get the seventh day part wonderfully well. Here we are on Sabbath, the seventh day. Adventism, here in Hollywood, we get part of Adventism pretty good too, and that is the recognition of Advent, recognition of God appearing in our world in the present tense. But sometimes I think we miss part of what Adventism is here, especially here at Hollywood SDA, and that is looking forward to something better. It's okay to wish for something better. It's okay to look forward to the second coming. And I know that I do. So I thought I would read just the last 2 verses of the Bible this morning. Revelation 22:20 and 21. He who testifies to these things says, yes, I am coming soon. Amen. Come, Lord Jesus. The grace of the Lord Jesus be with God's people. Amen. And that's the word of the Lord. And that makes me pretty happy, because sometimes I don't know what to do with things like what happened yesterday. But again, that's not really what I had planned to talk about today. So here is false start number 3. Hopefully this will not be a false start. I want to talk about euphemisms for a moment. I'm sure you know them well, these clever turns of phrase that are designed to obscure harsh realities and in some cases distract from certain doom. The dictionary definition of euphemism: the substitution of a mild, indirect, or vague expression for one thought to be offensive, harsh, or blunt. Probably the most fertile breeding ground for euphemisms is politics, don't you think? A couple of years ago, I don't know if you remember, the governor of South Carolina disappeared for a week, Mark Sanford, and his aides came up with the line that he was hiking on the Appalachian Trail, when in fact he had gotten on a plane and flown down to Argentina to rendezvous with a mistress. The phrase hiking the Appalachian Trail is now sort of code for curious situations which can be explained by marital infidelity. In 2008, when Hillary Clinton was in that bitter fight with Barack Obama in the Democratic primary, she would often tell the story about how she had been pinned down by sniper fire while on a trip to Bosnia during her husband's presidency. But then we got the video footage, which suggested otherwise. And in her apology press conference, she went in front of the cameras and admitted, "I did misspeak the other day." In this case, the word misspeak being a euphemism for willfully perpetuating a falsehood. Pitcher Roger Clemens had a variation of that one when he denied using performance-enhancing drugs but then his teammate, Andy Pettit, said that he and Clemens actually, yes, in fact, had juiced, and they had done it together. And later, Clemens said, I think Andy misremembered the events in the team clubhouse. One of my favorite euphemisms comes from the world of aviation. It's the term CFIT, actually an acronym, CFIT, which stands for Controlled Flight into Terrain. Yes, a crash. But a pilot will never use the word crash. They're too superstitious. At least not when they're on the tarmac or near an airplane. They will not use the word crash, so they call it a CFIT. A superstition that, kind of makes sense. One of my good friends is a commercial pilot, and I asked him about that this week, and he's like, yeah, no, we don't use the word crash ever. Euphemisms like controlled flight into terrain are perfectly acceptable, I think, in the abstract, right? But in the specific, they can be rather alarming. If you're on a plane that's heading down, you're not going to have much patience for a pilot who's parsing words. We are crashing. Euphemisms are everywhere, even here at the Hollywood Seventh-day Adventist Church. Lately, we've been describing ourselves as a church in transition. Church in transition being a euphemism for being forced to accept a pastoral change that we neither asked for nor agree with. In some respects, the way society in the 21st century has evolved, large swaths of our lives are a euphemism. It's just the way that it is. In an era when most of us are connected on multiple social media platforms, we become, in our own ways, I think, discerning curators of our own reality. Which reminds me of one of my favorite sketches from the TV show Portlandia. It's funny because it's true. Everyone on the internet, they're not having as great a time as you think they are. I guess people are just cropping out all the sadness. I know I'm guilty of cropping out sadness. What about you? It's an awfully common phenomenon, isn't it? And it's not just restricted to our existence on social media either. We put up facades and walls all over the place in real life as well as in online life. Ultimately, I think choosing every day to willfully misrepresent who we are. And why do we do that? It's safe. It keeps people at a distance, it keeps people out of our business, it protects us against vulnerability. The problem is, God calls us to be vulnerable with others. In fact, brokenness is something to be desired. In our first text this morning, Psalm 84, 5-7, it says, "Blessed are those whose strength is in you, whose hearts are set on pilgrimage. As they pass through the valley of Baca, they make it a place of springs. The autumn rains also cover it with pools. They go from strength to strength till each appears before God in Zion." This is the valley of Baca. Well, technically we don't know the exact location of the valley of Baca, but it is an area of Saudi Arabia that is very near, surrounds the vicinity of the city of Mecca. And in fact, Baca is an ancient name for Mecca, which means in the Islamic faith, this desolate place that the psalmist is talking about is one of the holiest places on earth. In Hebrew, the valley of Baca can be translated as the valley of tears, which to me makes for some awfully amazingly beautiful poetry. Looking at verse 6 again, "As they pass through the valley of Baca, as they pass through the valley of tears, they make it a place of springs. The autumn rains also cover it with pools." In other words, our tears, a physical manifestation of our brokenness, become a life-giving oasis in the desert. Nourishment comes to the parched earth only when we empty ourselves of darkness inside, clearing away a space for God's grace to spring up and flourish. 2 Corinthians 12, 9 and 10 says this: "The Lord said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong.'" So it's not about just enduring brokenness, but it's about finding joy in brokenness, which is a little bit different from rejoicing in brokenness, or even celebrating brokenness as something to be achieved. We have all achieved brokenness already. When Paul says, "I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses," and "I delight in weaknesses," he's doing so with the recognition that we are a dynamic species on a physical, intellectual, and spiritual continuum. We are not immovable objects, fixed in time and space. We constantly grow and change, and therefore weakness and brokenness is a starting point for service. After all, everyone is broken. It's a common mutual reference point from which to build an authentic relationship with others. If we are dishonest about our own brokenness, how are we expected to serve? Admitting our own brokenness, coming to terms with our own fallibility, breeds trust in others, I think. So a couple of weeks ago, I finally finished the, I guess I'll call it a pseudo-documentary, Religulous. I do not recommend it. Bill Maher created it a couple of years ago pretty much as a vehicle for him to be able to skewer all types of religion and extol the virtues of atheism. And he basically kind of does like a bad Michael Moore impression, just kind of poking at people, and he just doesn't, he doesn't do it well. I'm not particularly sentimental about my faith, about doctrines. I think it's important to examine what you believe, whether it's religious views or political opinions or whatever. I think an honest critique refines our beliefs. But there are many problems still with Religulous. Bill Maher mocks Judaism for its adherence to tradition. He calls all Muslims terrorists, which is awfully surprising to hear from a pretty liberal guy. He portrays Christians as stupid hicks who don't know any better than to believe a crazy made-up story. But my biggest problem with Religulous is that Bill Maher basically claims that the biggest problem with religion is that all of them each stakes divine claims to truth with a capital T, and that anyone who thinks otherwise is a threat and should be eliminated. But then Bill Maher proceeds to outline the ways in which atheism is the ultimate truth with a capital T, and how all religion is a threat that should be eliminated. He either doesn't get the irony or he doesn't care. Having said that, and that's my big disclaimer, there is one amazing nugget of wisdom at the end of the film that I think we would do well to apply to our Christian experience, and it is this. Bill Maher says, religion is dangerous because it allows human beings who don't have all the answers to think that they do. The only appropriate attitude for man to have about the big questions is not the arrogant certitude that is the hallmark of religion, but doubt. Doubt is humble, and that's what man needs to be. Bill Maher is making this argument in service of the abolition of religion, but it's the same argument that's been around for thousands of years from God himself. When we think we have all the answers, when we put up a facade of certainty, of everything's all right, of answers, not questions, when we crop out the sadness and the brokenness and the doubt, we become arrogant. We foist our flawed opinions and concepts upon others, rather than acting as a facilitator for God's love. We end up a pilot, leading our passengers on a controlled flight into terrain. So it would seem then that doubt keeps us humble. Brokenness keeps our airplane aloft. When we allow our protective outer shells to fully crack, it releases our inner spirit to intermingle with God's Holy Spirit. I realize that this isn't a particularly grand, sweeping bit of rhetoric that is going to cause us to be inspired to stand up and sing a rousing chorus of How Great Thou Art. But in its own way, the simple fact of mutual brokenness is inspiring, right? We're all in this together. Right now, all over the country, it's graduation season, which is another place for bold platitudes, sweeping rhetoric, proclamations like, "You can do anything you set your mind to," "Live every day as if it is your last," or "Follow your dreams, even if they don't pay." That's fine, but maybe you've seen recently on social media, there's this graduation speech kind of making the rounds from David Foster Wallace, who in 2005, just a few years before he died, he gave a speech at Kenyon College in Ohio, which offered up a bit of less traditional advice to the graduates. It's an ode to the mundane, advice for everyday living, how to confront the brokenness in our daily routine. I could tell you about it, or I could let him speak for himself, which is what I'm going to do. So as I close this afternoon, I'd just like to share the last 6 or 7 minutes of this speech. Some multimedia graphic arts company here in LA did a cool visualization of it, which is what I've got with us this morning. But it's just interesting to me because it's a speech that, of course, is geared towards the education crowd, towards the academic crowd. But as I've watched it 8 or 9 or 10 times, the concepts apply so beautifully and perfectly to our spiritual and religious lives that I thought it was worth playing it in church. That's pretty good, right? I actually don't have anything to add to that. I'm glad that, unlike what David Foster Wallace portrays in this video, for me, because I'm religious and because I'm spiritual, it's not just up to me by myself to choose to change my natural default setting. I have help with that. And that's what I find most inspiring, I think, about this whole idea of brokenness, is that, of course, I'm broken. Of course, we're all broken. And of course, that is our starting point for service. But it doesn't stay there. And we don't have to experience our brokenness on our own. We have each other. And most importantly, we have God, who knows all about brokenness himself from Jesus' own personal experience as well. Let's pray. Lord, thank you that we don't have to rely on ourselves alone to deal with our own brokenness. Thank you that you are here and that you experienced it even more fully than we will in our lives. It helps us, I think, come to terms with the fact that we're dealing with challenges in our lives, and knowing that you have been there before, and that you have experienced them as well, helps us. Please help us to change our natural default setting. Make us aware, make us conscious. And thank you for your incredible love, which conquers all. Amen.